We're going to be using PHP to make our trial order alternate rather than rely on a purely random principle. We're also going to be able to add the ability to put something up in the URL bar that will dictate a specific trial order. So there are two ways we can go about this. One will rely on the saved data that each user submits when they complete a trial. This data is saved at the end of each experiment. And the other one would rely on a file that's edited at the very beginning of the experiment. So if we rely on the data at the end of the experiment, then each user would have to complete their experiment before the next user starts. Otherwise, if you get, a spike of users, then that would create a situation where every single user has the exact same trial distribution. But using this file means that if user 2, for example, drops out and user 4 drops out, then users 1 and 3, the only ones to submit their data, will both have the exact same distribution. The system that relies on only the saved data at the end doesn't have this problem. So if user 2 drops out, then user 3 would have the exact same setup that user 2 had, and you would have, one with one distribution and one with another. So, there are benefits to both, so we'll cover both. So to start, let's go to our server files, and let's change v.html to v.php. And you will also want to change the link in your index file. Okay, now in v.php, go down to the bottom of the page to the script tag, and after you create your trial order object, add some line breaks, and let's remove this trial order.rearrange. We'll be specifying this manually now. So to do PHP inside of your document here, you want to start with an opening angle brace, question mark, PHP, couple line breaks, question mark, ending brace. Okay, so we are going to have a variable. Variables in PHP start with a $sign, so we're just going to call this v. It's going to sort of be the version that we have added in the URL bar. So v equals 0, so that's just going to be its default value. But if we did set it, let's do if is set. The elements in a URL bar are held in this $_ uppercase get array. So opening square brace, v. Okay, so if it is set, then we will set our v variable to whatever was there. So v equals, and we're going to turn it into a number. So let's do int val. Okay, and I'm also going to trim out quotes because I know I accidentally put quotes on these things, and if nobody in your lab has this problem, then don't worry about it. But it's some error prevention. So trim. Okay, now let's do our get again. So $_ get v. Okay, and for our trim, let's do a comma and then an escaped quote. Okay, so if we've actually specified a v in our URL bar, then we set our variable v to that. Otherwise, it's just 0. Let me increase my size a little bit here. Okay. So now, let's make an actual version that we're going to deal with. So $ version equals underscore, and then you use periods in PHP to concatenate strings, so $v. Also, another difference is you have to use semicolons. In JavaScript, they're optional, but they're not in PHP. So if $V, let's say if it's greater than 1,000, then we'll do something, and we're going to have 4 different conditions. We're going to have forced shuffling, an attempt to make it alternate, and then 2 other versions, one for making the last trial go first and one for making the first trial go first. So else if, and else. Okay, so we're going to make this one be our forced shuffle. And we're just going to make an order type equal to -1. And we'll deal with that later. So we'll make, let's say if they didn't input anything at all, so it's 0, or if they inputted a 0 directly, then that will be our distributed version. So $V equals 0. Okay, and then if it's neither of these, then we only have 2 other options. So we're going to do $V modulus 2 equals 1. Then we'll say order type is 1. And I know I could just set order type to this value, but I'm wanting to output some other things as well, so that's why I'm doing the if statements here. Oh, but this would be 0. So now if we were to run this, absolutely nothing would happen. We'd do some processing on the PHP side, on the server side, but we don't actually have anything in here that changes our document. So our document would look the same, except for that part down here we deleted. So to add anything to our document, we're going to use this echo. And I'm just going to use this for debugging right now. So we're going to write some JavaScript, so console.warn. And I'm using warn instead of log because I want my messages to show up highlighted in yellow. So using some single quotes here, let's do shuffling. Okay, and ending quote for JavaScript, new line, and, semicolon, and then a semicolon for PHP. Okay, so let's paste these around. So let's say this one will do the last first, and this one will do first first. Okay, so now let's deal with our order types. So we're going to make a switch statement that takes the order type. So the default case will just be this -1 forced shuffle. Oh, echo. And break. There's no. Okay, and then case 1 was last first, so opening square brace for an array, 1, comma 0, closing square brace. Okay, and then this one will be 0, comma 1, and that is case 0. Okay, Now let's use this version, and our version is always going to say what we specified in the URL bar. But if we didn't specify anything or we specified a 0, then our distribution is going to be, based on, in this case, the file count. So we are going to actually want to add something to our version to let us know, which trial distribution that actually was. But first, let's get our file count. So this will be an object file system iterator. Okay, and we're going to be going through our data folder. So data slash. Okay, and now we're going to count how many files we have. So our order type is going to equal iterator count files. Okay, and we're going to do the modulus 2 because we only want 2 possible values to come out of this. And now we're going to append this to our version to let it know, which distribution it gave us. And our version is going to be added to our version key down here at the end, which gets sent back to us. So version. Remember, we use dot for concatenation, so dot equals underscore dot order type. Okay, I have a typo here in switch, SWITCH. Okay. Now let's make a JavaScript variable. So echo lit key equal, and I'm going to use a single quote dot version dot single quote a semicolon for JavaScript, new line, and a semicolon for PHP. Okay, so now let's run this. And it's v.php now, so PHP, enter. Okay, so we got our distribute message. Oh, one thing else that we want to do is we're supposed to add this new key element we just made to version key. So plus key. Okay, so let's add some more debug messages to our switch case here. So if it was 0, first, and if it was 1, last first. Okay, so now, let's see, we got the first. If we refresh it again, it should always stay the same because this one is based on the file count in our data folder, which is not changing. So let's jump through this real quick. We will complete a trial. And remember that our non-windowed trial was the first one. Submit. Okay, now let's refresh. Now we have last first. So let's jump through this again. First one was windowing this time, so that's nice. Okay, and now we're at first again, so that's good. Let's use, let's first look at version key. Okay, so we have the trial order, then a 0, and then another 0. So the first 0 is our version that we put up here, which we didn't. Just remember, it defaults to 0. And then the second one is the distribution sort of index. So that was the first came first statement. So this would be 1 if last comes first, 0 if first comes first. So let's do a question mark v equals, let's do 10. Okay, and now let's get our version key again, and we can now see our 10. And it removed the 0 because we're now forcing it, we're not distributing anymore, so we have no need to actually see what the automated distributor, put in there. Okay, and now let's try v equals 11. And we forced last first, and it says first. So that's wrong. Let's check the console where our server is running for errors. Order type on 563. 563. So we're using order type with lowercase t, and then some reason I used an uppercase T right here. Let's actually just quickly do a find. So I guess actually mostly I used an uppercase T, except for on these two. Okay, so let's try that again with 11. So this should hopefully say last first now. All right, that's better. Okay, and lastly, let's do 1001. And this should force shuffle. Okay. And so that's it for the version which uses the data files as sort of a key to trial distribution. So let's now use a file that gets saved at the beginning of each experiment. So we're going to use this use.txt. If you open it up, it has a number inside of it. So make sure you have this file and that it has a number inside of it. So let's swap out. Let's move this v greater than 1,000. So we'll have it be v equal to 0 or v is greater than 1,000. Let's remove this statement now. And then instead of doing all of my file counting, I'm not. So to do this, we're going to need a file. So let's do fname, it would be a file name, equals use.txt. freader will be sort of a pointer that we're going to use to navigate around the file. So we're going to set that by calling fopen, and then we'll do the file name we just get, comma, and then this is sort of a mode, so we're going to do read, which tells us to start at the beginning of the file, and then plus, which is just to tell us that we do intend on writing this file too, so make sure we have that. So if we actually opened the file, so if freader, and because anybody who's running an experiment, who's accessing the experiment could access this file, we're going to actually have to lock access to it, so flock. So this keeps somebody else from reading it, or two people from trying to write to it simultaneously and messing up our values. So let's see, let's do freader, and we'll do lock all uppercase underscore ex for exclusive. So this is sort of like if multiple people are reading a file simultaneously, that's fine, but if we're writing to it, we definitely don't want anybody to read to it until we're done writing. And we also want this to be non-blocking. And basically, if we didn't have this non-blocking, then this flock function will just wait until whichever process is reading the file stops and unlocks the file. However, if this happens, you're probably having a lot of users trying to access this experiment at once, and you don't want this one file to be sort of a bottleneck for them. So basically, if they can't access the file, we're just going to have them do a random trial. Otherwise, we'll distribute in the alternating fashion. So let's do fcontent. And then we'll dump our file into that. So fread, freader, And then we need how much we want to read, so we're going to do the entire file. So file size of our f name. So this is just 1 byte, but you know. Okay, now let's do order type. And this will equal a number from our f content. So let's make our version sort of the same way we did before, but with the file contents instead. Okay, now let's have the order. We're going to increment the order, so next order is going to equal order type plus 1. Okay, now we're going to, if next order is greater than a certain number, in our case it's just going to be 2, then we loop it back down to 0. This is because, you know, we only have 2 possible ways we could organize our trials, so, you know, there's no reason to go higher than 2. So if next order is greater than or equal to 2, then next order equals 0. Okay, so now to write it back to our file, we're going to do f content is going to equal a string strval of our next order, and we're going to rewind our file reader because we moved our file reader all the way to the end of the file when we read it, so we need to move it back to the beginning. So rewind freader, and let's write our new value back to the file. Okay, and now let's make sure to unlock our file. Oops. Okay. So it's worth mentioning that we are only writing a single byte back to the file. So if there were ever multiple bytes in the file, we would only be overwriting the first one. So if your order ever has more than a single digit of varieties, then you will need to pad it with zeros. So to do something like that, we could do if, let's see, f content, oh no, string length, strlen. So if this is less than 2, so if it's not a 2-digit number, then we will fwrite or freader a 0. Okay. But this is all assuming we're actually able to open the file and, you know, acquire a lock on it. If that's not the case, we need to account for that. So make an else here. And let's see. Let's do order type equals -1. So this is like if we had force shuffled it. And then we're going to change our version dot equals, and then we're just going to do x_x. Okay, and now the rest of the code can stay the same. So we're going to add a debug message into this else statement. So distribute failed to open file. Okay, so save, and let's refresh. Okay, so now anytime we refresh, it should actually change the order. So let's see if we refresh again. It's first, last, first. Okay, so that's good. Let's go to our use.text, and we can see that it has that 0 that we pad to it now, so that's nice. Let's rename it to just use 1 or something, so that way it can't find it. Refresh, and it lets us know that it failed to open the file, but that's okay. It just gave us something random. That's fine. Okay, but let's say now that you're using this version, you have a lot of users dropping out before they finish the trials. To fix this, you could try and sometime during the middle, re-ask the server for an order. So let's say they're all dropping out, right about when they're consenting or something. You have something in your intro page that's like, we're looking for a radiologist of a certain skill set, then all the medical students would drop out or something. So then sometime after that would be when you would want to query the server for the order. So to do that, we're going to use something similar to the way we actually sent the data to the server the first time. So in common.js, search for send data. And we are just going to copy this function. Okay, and I'm going to rename it get order. Okay, so we're going to use 2 functions for this. We're going to get the order with 1, and we're going to try to go to the first trial with another. So let's make our other function. Try start. Oops. Okay, and we're going to use 2 flags to communicate between these 2 functions. So we'll just let waiting for order equal false, and let wait for order equal true. So if we need to wait for the order, then this is going to take us to a blocker page. And if this takes us to a blocker page, then it lets the get order function know that we are waiting for an order. And so the very second it comes in, it should pull us out of that blocker page. So this function will be pretty simple. We're just going to do if wait for order. Then go to page blocker. We will also want to change the blocker text. And so this will say preparing trials. And we want to set that waiting flag to true. So waiting equals true. Okay, otherwise, if we've already gotten orders by the time we've tried to start, then we will just go ahead and start the trials. So else trial order dot start next. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff in this function, our new getOrder function, that we won't need because we're not actually sending data anymore. So let's remove the lines that take us to a blocker page because that's handled up here. And we'll be getting order. Okay, and we don't really care about much of this. and we only need one form of error correction. So either we successfully got an order, in which case we'll apply it, or we failed to get an order, in which case we'll just go full random. Okay, and we no longer care about status text. We will be getting response text. Okay, and let's look for this transmit function, pull the guts out of it. Okay, so we're going to, instead of going to our processing page, we're going to go to another page. So make a string, let's call it order.php. And it doesn't matter whether you use post or get here, because we're not actually going to be sending any data, we're trying to get it. So remove the data. Okay, so the response text is going to be in the form of a JavaScript object, a serialized one. So let's see, that would be lit our response equal JSON. So JavaScript object notation dot parse this dot response text, and this response will have two parameters in it. One will be the order and one will be the version. So version key equals plus equals. And just like usual, we're going to append the underscore. And since we're in JavaScript now, remember that you're using plus equals instead of dot equals. Plus response dot version. Okay, and we're going to arrange it. So trial order dot rearrange, and then response dot order. Okay, but if we fail to get it, then we will just rearrange it with no new order, and our version key, we'll just make it underscore F for failed. Okay, and now after these little statements, we want to actually, let's reset our blocker text, because it's possible the viewer still hasn't loaded. So just because we got our order and that blocker's done, doesn't mean we're still not on a blocker page. So let's see. So the blocker text, let's just say loading CT viewer. Okay, and then we want to let this function know that we now have the order. So wait for order now equals false. But if we were waiting for order, then we need to make sure to start the trial. Trial order dot start next. Okay, and we're not quite done yet. We need to make this order.php file. So go to your build files, create a document, order.php. Okay, so let's take the PHP that we added in our main file, and we will paste that in order.php. So let's PHP. Okay. And we're going to be pulling a couple things out of this. So we're no longer getting a version because we're not getting anything. So let's remove that bit. And we don't really care about if statement anymore. because we're just going to try and distribute, and if not, then we do random. So that means that we no longer need this curly brace or any of these other statements. You don't want anything that says echo because that will be our response text, so definitely remove all of these debug statements. Okay. And down here in order type, let me fix my tabs real quick. So it's an order type. We're going to create a new value, a variable, order. And this will equal an empty array. We're shuffling it. And then order equals 1, 0. And 0, 1. Don't know why it's messing up my tabs here. Oops. Oh, I got a parenthesis I need to take away. Okay, and also our version, we never actually created an initial version, so let's remove this dot equals, and we no longer need the underscore because that's appended in our JavaScript. Anything you can offload to JavaScript, definitely do that, because your server is going to count how hard it works on your PHP, and you actually have a quota. I mean, you probably won't reach it with these simple experiments, but anything you can offload and do off of the server, definitely offload it. But also change this version down here. Okay, let's see. All right, and now to send back our data, let's create a response. So response equals, and this is going to be an array. So arrays in PHP are very much like dictionaries. So you just specify a keyword. So version, spell it correctly. Make an arrow with an equal sign and an angle bracket. And then let's use our version variable, comma, then order. And we will link that to our newly created order variable. Okay, and now we want to actually send this, so echo JSON encode response. Okay, and now let's go to v.php. Scroll up to the top where we have that button that takes us straight to the viewer. So in our intro page, let's go to our button, and instead of doing trial order.start next, we're going to do get order, and we're going to do try start. Okay, and before we finish, let's go back down to the bottom. We always had our version key be constant because there was never any reason to change it afterward. Make sure it's a variable. Okay, and let's refresh. Show viewer. Oh, right. We're not done. Let's change all of this in our v.php because we're no longer calculating the trial order here. So all we really want to keep is whatever version we plugged in to our URL bar. So let's see. So let's do. Okay, so 0 is going to be our distribute, so that's if nothing was entered into the URL bar. And then we'll make 1000 be force shuffle again. So let's so let's move this up here. Nope, wrong. And let's move these guys into their area. So first. Last first. Okay, now we don't need order type anymore. Okay. Let's make another variable. So echo there, because we want this accessible all over. Get from server. And then this will equal false because, oh, well, this would equal true here, I guess, but anyway. Okay, so anywhere where we have forced a specific outcome and already completed it, we will make sure this is set to false. But here, where we're wanting to distribute it, set it to true. And now let's go back to common.js. And let's see, so this get order, if get from server, so if that's not true, then we do not want to wait for an order. And we do not want to send out this request. Okay, so let's try that. Okay, so we successfully got the data. I know it says transmitted, but that's carryover. Let's see, so the version was X. Oh. So it was X because we forgot to rename our file back to use.txt, so it couldn't find it. And so basically it told us, it sent us back an empty array, which made us shuffle our own array. Okay, that's better. So it gives us a version, and it actually sends us an array to use. So let's hit refresh and try it again. And it's now in a different order. Okay, but to make this useful, well, so let's try skipping it now. So v equals 10. Okay, it didn't send out a request, so v equal 11. Again, didn't send out a request. Oh, that should be 1. All right, so that looks good. I mean, it's worth mentioning if you want to use a distribution as well as have a version number for tagging a user, you might want to add a v equals, or is greater than, let's say, 2000. So now if it's 2001, then we're going to distribute, show the viewer, and it does successfully try to do that. So if we try and get our version key, then we have our version that we gave as well as the distribution that we got. So now let's actually plug this in areas where it makes sense in our v.php, because right now it's just in that debug button. But let's say, as we said earlier, everybody might leave when we, ask them to consent, and typically anybody who consents completes the trial. So when we finish the instruction page, let's add something to the button that leaves it. So let's do the get order. And then at the end of our demographics page, instead of doing this trial order.start next, we're going to do try start. Okay, and so the reason we're doing it in 2 stages is because you can see the little loading circle pops up whenever you try doing it in 1 stage, and that's going to take even longer when you're reaching out across the internet for that order. So doing it in 2 stages allows us to hide that little hiccup. So for example, this is my instruction page. Once I hit next, it's going to get my order. And again, no hiccup because nothing's actually changed, from my point of view. And now we already have the order, so when I start the next trial, I actually, go straight to it. Alright, so that's just a few ways to try and make your trial order alternate back and forth. Hopefully one of them work for you.